It is a real honor to be here this morning, and thank you, Carlos, to invite me as a moderator of this panel. Thank you for the opportunity. We are going to proceed with the presentation of our panelists, but before, just to say that we have three different realities here, different regions, different governance, Vancouver, Guatemala, and Quito, Ecuador. There is a common ground, however. We're facing demography, changes in demography, disasters, demand of services, water, energy, sanitation, transportation, urban mobility, waste management, technology, economic reactivation, especially during the pandemic and after, employment. And our aspiration as cities, and independently of these three realities, is to have more knowledge-based communities, low carbon, circular economy. Still, we are facing in some of our countries some political realities. It's not easy, and some of the countries in Latin America with some disturbances, political instability. But at the end of the day, our goal, I think, independently, if it is an academic point of view or a political point of view, is to make citizens' life more comfortable, establish an equilibrium between social peace, development, and sustainable development. So let me introduce our panelists. It's a real honor. We have three panelists with different backgrounds, and especially because we are basically on the ground. People here in this panel is on the ground, is working hard in cities, different cities and different realities. Bryan Buggey is Director of Vancouver Economic Commission. He is a senior executive with more than 3 decades of experience. He's a business leader in entrepreneurship, sustainability, innovation, management consulting. He now has his duties as a director of this important body of the city of Vancouver. Bryan is actively involved in the city greenest city action plan, renewable city 250, zero waste to 40, digital strategy, and smart city initiatives. And he's a leader in all Canada, recognized by some of the institutions in Canada. He believes that transformation of the local economy to low carbon circular future is underway. So there is a transition, and he was recognized by Canada, the Pan-Canadian Clean Future Award for his leadership in green and sustainable economic development. Good morning, Bryan.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, so thank you for Canada is a country we love. Haven't been there for a while, but I look forward to come back. So we have Carlos Alejandro Soberanis. He's an architect from Guatemala, from the University Francisco Marroquín, a master's degree in urbanism. He's an urban planner. He obtained his master in Spain, in the University of Alcalá de Henares. He's currently the position of alderman, first trustee of the Municipality of Guatemala. He's a member of the council, a professor of the Faculty of Architecture of the University Francisco Marroquín, and he's in charge of some of the new projects of the Guatemala City transition program towards sustainability. He's a leader. He's basically very close to the government of the city of Guatemala and in charge right now. And he's also a scholar. And so we have also here Mauricio Rodas, former mayor of Quito, Ecuador. Mauricio is a doctor in jurisprudence from the Pontificia University of Católica de Ecuador. He also a master's degree in government administration and a master's degree in political science from the University of Pennsylvania, working for CEPAL, OECLAC in Latin America, also as an advisor to the government of Mexico. He was the mayor of Ecuador from 2013 to 2019. Recently, just finished his position as mayor. And also, very important, he hosts the Mayor United Nations Conference on Sustainable Urban Development, Habitat 3, a few years ago. And he was the host of this important event. And he also had been receiving awards from the University of Pennsylvania as one of the 100 most influential people in the world on climate action. So as you see, very, very, very representative, very clear people working on the ground. And so we're going to start with this session, some maximum of 15 minutes each speaker, starting with Bryan, and then we're going to have some interaction between us, and then some questions from the audience. So, Bryan, the floor is yours.
Okay, well, that's great. Welcome to Vancouver, and thank you so much for having me today. And my apologies that I do not speak Spanish, but I'm hopeful that you'll learn something from Vancouver today anyways. So I just wanted to acknowledge, if I can, yeah, this is an aerial photograph or a satellite photograph of the Pacific Northwest. And where that circle is the region or the metropolitan area of Vancouver. And when we come up this high, we can see what a beautiful and spectacular area of the world that Vancouver resides on. And Vancouver is a city of reconciliation with the First Nations people, or the native tribes, as the Americans say. So I just wanted to acknowledge that we're speaking to you from the unceded and traditional ancestral territories of the Coast Salish peoples that have been living on this land for the millennial. And this includes, in the Greater Vancouver region, it includes the Squamish, the Musqueam, and the Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. So the Vancouver Economic Commission is a economic development agency owned and operated by the city of Vancouver. So we're very much part of the city's staff, and we represent Vancouver globally in the context of investment promotion, as well as locally for local economic development. And there's a lot of things that we do in economic development, but in the context of smart cities, what I wanted to do was emphasize that we help foster innovation and foster collaborations right across our economy. And that's most of what I'll be speaking about today. So here's a photograph or an aerial photo of Vancouver, and you can see we're very close to the US border. And this is sitting at the mouth of the Fraser River, which is one of the few rivers in North America that's not dammed. It's a tremendous salmon run. And of course, you can see the snow-capped mountains just to the north of the city. And there's 3 freshwater reservoirs that actually flow down into the city. So Vancouver has some of the freshest, highest quality drinking water anywhere in the world. And of course, on the west side of the city is the Pacific Ocean. That's the Salish Sea. And of course, with the trade winds that blow off of the ocean, we also have some incredibly clean air relative to most North American cities. So suffice it to say, we have a lot of advantages, both naturally, culturally, and otherwise. For example, because of our environment and our surroundings, there's a real cultural respect for nature. We call it the environmental ethos, which really started to take hold in the 1960s and 1970s, and that started with Greenpeace. So many people don't know that Greenpeace was actually founded and created in Vancouver in the early 1970s, I think 1972, when it all started. And so a couple of generations later, who would have thought that we could call that environmental ethos a bit of an economic competitive advantage today? because managing the environment while growing the economy is more important than ever. Another thing that happened in the 1970s was the agricultural land reserve. So you can see all of the space to the east of the city in the Fraser Valley was protected in the 1970s from further expansion, expansion of the city. So there's very little suburban sprawl compared to most other cities. In fact, you know, the metropolitan area is only about 28 or 2,900 square kilometers. That includes 22 municipalities and has about a population of 2.5 million. And on a per capita, GDP per capita basis, it's probably around 150 billion now, or roughly $50,000 to $55,000 US. And it's, you know, in terms of population density, on a per square kilometer basis, we're well over 5,000 people per square kilometer. So this density really makes Vancouver much more walkable and bikeable than most other cities. And of course, we should also mention that Vancouver's the closest city to Asia and the closest city by air on the west coast to Europe. And we've got several free trade agreements that again makes Vancouver very uniquely positioned compared to any other city on the west coast because of those free trade agreements. So lots of things to be very thankful for in Vancouver's economy. And I'll speak more about that in a second, but wanted to emphasize that because of that location, because of the environment, and because of some foresight in the 1970s, Vancouver has grown up quite differently than other North American cities. So, you know, we've been asking ourselves in Vancouver, what is a smart city? And there's lots of definitions out there, of course. And, you know, I think the standard or traditional definition has a lot to do with policies and strategies, but most importantly, leveraging the latest in technology and data science, data management. And it's beneficial to cities, of course, it's beneficial to businesses, and of course, improves our quality of life. And, you know, we started a journey on becoming more of a smart city all the way back in 2013. And back in those days, we were working hard on an official city-wide digital strategy. And we came up with 4 themes and 9 concrete actions. Those themes were centered around citizen engagement and access to technology, urban or digital infrastructure, of course, a focus on our digital economy, and also digitizing our city operations. So within the digital economy, we took on 3 initiatives. One of them centered around supporting incubators and accelerators, which of course is very common in many cities around the world today. The second one was improving the regulatory environment. And the third one, which I'll speak to more at the end of the presentation, had to do with enabling proof of concepts and demonstration pilots. By 2017, we entered into a smart city challenge and really focused on pilots and autonomous transit and autonomous vehicles. So we started to engage with all kinds of partners. Our major telco, TELUS, spent more than $1 billion in implementing 5G across the city. And now as we move beyond you know, the implementation of 5G and advanced networks, we're beginning to focus more on interoperability of our IT systems and how they're used by city staff in Vancouver. So, you know, we've made tremendous progress in terms of our what we call digital maturity, but at the same time, technology continues to advance. So we could say the bar has raised, which has, you know, been elusive for us in terms of trying to keep up. So what I'd like to throw to the audience today is to reconsider what is smart city today, because today we are in a climate emergency. And this really makes us think about how we must change our priorities so that smart city as a policy or practice, and of course as a variety of technologies, actually focuses on greenhouse gases, focuses on carbon emissions, and helps the city of today decarbonize the local economy. And, you know, this is a picture of Vancouver that we're starting to see every single summer now, whether the smoke is coming from British Columbia or in this past summer, it came up from California. And it actually makes our air pollution, which traditionally is some of the cleanest air anywhere in the world, is now about as clean as the city of Beijing or the city of Shanghai. So this is becoming a tremendous irritant. Sometimes the smoke lasts for weeks in Vancouver. It's pretty serious. And so in 2017, when this picture was taken, we had the worst forest fire season on record. And the smoke that came into Vancouver actually created a health crisis. We had to ask people to stay inside. The smoke was so bad. At the end of the summer, the economy for Vancouver and our province of British Columbia took more than a $3 billion hit. Typically, we might spend $60 million on fighting forest fires. That year, we spent more than $600 million in fire suppression. So this sort of thing is here now. Climate risk to our local economy is already here, and it's only getting worse. So we should be asking the question then, what can we do within the climate emergency to turn this into an opportunity for smart city? And of course, over the past 10 years, we've already done a lot. You know, we've actually reduced our greenhouse gases since 2010 or 2007 by 9%, while growing the economy more than 30%. Even though we're only 7% of the population of Canada, we have 30% of Canada's clean tech sector here, and that continues to grow. And at the city, we're doing lots of other things too, including reducing solid waste, reducing the amount of trips that are traveled in the city, planting more trees all the time. So we have lots of data to provide evidence that we're heading in the right direction. But unfortunately, it's still not enough. And you know, we've created a reputation, and I hope you know Vancouver as one of the most livable cities in the world, where we're already leading on climate action, where our green jobs are growing by more than 6% every year. And you know, in terms of the North American context, we are doing extremely well. It's only the European cities that we compare ourselves to these days. So the challenge now is that we have 2030 targets that we are nowhere close to achieving. We have a trajectory that's going to have us miss our 2030 targets as set by the Paris Accord in 2015 by quite a bit. So we're asking ourselves, what can we do to bend that curve, to get back on track? And just wanted to note that most of our greenhouse gas emissions are coming from two sources. One of them is our buildings, and the second one, of course, is transportation and mobility. So we've come up with a response as City Council requested. City Council declared the climate emergency in early 2019, and we've been hard at work ever since. We've come up with a response, and I'd like to talk very quickly just about those action items 2, 3, 4, and 5, which address the GHGs from the built environment and from transportation. So again, as I'm walking through a couple of these actions, what we want to be thinking about is how can smart city opportunities emerge because we're taking direct action on climate. And I think those opportunities are abundant. In active transportation and transit, our goal here is to have 2/3 of all trips within the city made by foot or by bike or by public transit. Currently, we're sitting at about 50%, so that's a fairly aggressive move. And the big, bold game changer here is to implement transport pricing. In other words, congestion pricing. So that's being proposed right now and being debated in City Council. And we hope that it passes. And if it does, then we'll continue to expand and improve our biking infrastructure. We'll build out more dedicated bus lanes to improve bus speed. We'll obviously encourage more walking, taking back streets, promoting remote and flexible work options, eliminating parking minimums and introducing parking maximums in buildings. And of course, introducing more on-street parking. So if I just switch to parking in particular, think again about what that means for our smart city opportunities. Currently, about 10% of the city has parking meters on the streets, and the goal here is to get to 100% coverage, which would, we believe, make a difference in how people move and where people park and how much they drive. But of course, it'll be centered around carbon. So those with electric vehicles would get a pass, or those with zero emission modes of transport would get a pass. So how can you monitor this? How can you report out on this? I think when it comes to parking garages and sensors and monitors across the city, including for parking meters, some tremendous opportunities in parking. Of course, zero emission vehicles, again, a huge opportunity when you think about how they can become autonomous. And I'm just flipping through to go a bit faster and getting to the built environment. And so within green buildings, again, the goal here is to establish zero emission space and water heating in particular, but essentially smart building technologies have a role to play. So how can we do a better job of monitoring, say building energy management systems, get those reporting up into, databases to help industry, developers, and citizens and landlords do a better job of managing energy across the city. So I want to respect your time here, so I'll just cut through to the end. By the way, can everybody still hear me?
Yes, we do.
Okay, great.
Yes, indeed, perfectly.
So here's the game. We're in 2020 right now, and you can see where we are in terms of our current trend. And if we don't implement these kinds of policies, then we're not going to hit our climate targets. But also, we won't have created these new opportunities for investment, new opportunities for smart technologies to be implemented, and of course, for our innovators right here in Vancouver to pilot and demonstrate new solutions. So it's as much an economic opportunity as it is a climate action plan. And even when it comes to our businesses in Vancouver, there is significant savings over time. We're estimating more than $1 billion in savings over a 10-year period when you account for total life cycle analysis. So we believe that, a climate emergency actually enables a smarter city. When we think about 5G networks and autonomous vehicles, integrated mobility, car sharing, and so forth, can help us rapidly decarbonize. And of course, that's the same thing with our buildings. And we just recently did a study on our zero emissions building bylaw that was passed a couple of years ago, and we uncovered a $3.3 billion market opportunity for smart building tech and other products. And in fact, it was 6 distinct product categories that have created a new opportunity for our building and construction sectors. So I'll wrap up with this idea and something that we're doing in Vancouver right now. We call it Project Greenlight. It's a curated demonstration platform where we're helping our companies get access to major assets, to roll out pilots and demonstrations on how to reduce the environmental footprint in a smart, efficient way. Think of it really as a platform for onboarding innovation and really continuing to develop our brand as an innovation platform or a city of innovators in the smart city space. So companies would respond to a call for applications for very specific challenges that are put out by our partners. And then we would vet them to determine if they qualify to do a demonstration on any number of municipal assets or institutional assets. And so over the last couple of years, we've developed this whole asset owner network, which includes our major transit authority, our natural gas provider, big real estate, commercial real estate firm, plus a couple of cities, the city of New Westminster, and of course the city of Vancouver. And so we're able to open up billions of dollars worth of assets to allow for demonstrations that we hope could make a difference and ultimately accelerate the adoption of these technologies and get them set up faster. So, you know, over the past 10 years, what I can tell you in terms of lessons learned and helping us become greener and tackle climate while growing the economy, while supporting innovation, is that leadership really does matter. Leadership at City Hall, leadership at the national level as well. And what we've learned is if we can start in the public sector with regulation, smart regulation stimulates innovation. And of course, data matters. Tracking and reporting out on that data also really matters. So while government is the platform, if you like, or the enabler, because it has those tools, at the end of the day, it's the business community with their technology solutions that are going to help us tackle this crisis. So that's it from me. I'm looking forward to taking your questions, and I hope that was helpful. If you'd like to learn more about what's happening in Vancouver, I'd invite you to go to vancouvereconomic.com/lens, and you can subscribe to our newsletter as one way to learn more about what's happening in our economy. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Bryan. Thank you. We appreciate your talk. Very interesting how smart cities must be addressed to sustainability. It's very important, impressive what you have been achieving in Vancouver. Thank you. And now we have Carlos Soberanis, as I mentioned, from Guatemala, from the city of Guatemala. He's also a man on the ground. So welcome, Carlos. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Ricardo. Thank you, Carlos. Although English is not my mother tongue, I'll try to do my best in explaining the city of Guatemala and the vision that Mayor Quiñones has for the development of the city. So basically, we are speaking about our planning for the next years in the city. And Mayor Quiñones, who took over office on last January before COVID actually hit on Guatemala City on the 13th of March, proposed these purposes for the city of Guatemala in his speech in the 15th of January. So we are pointing at developing better quality of life for our neighbors, for the more opportunities for our citizens, especially the youth and the young, and the economic development through generating more job opportunities for everybody. So why is it important for our city to take into consideration the young people? It's because we are going through a demographic bonus. Some of the cities along the world have been going through this a long time ago, and we are dealing with that situation right now. And we are seeing that, Mayor Quiñones is seeing that as an opportunity to create better basis for all the young people that in 12 years, in 15 years, in 20 years are going to be people that are going to have a family, probably, that are going to probably have kids, and that will be in need of work opportunities, of job opportunities, and especially of places, of dignified places to live and a better city to increment their quality of life. So Guatemala City has been moving a long time, and the last time it settled down, it was in the year 1776, right in the green spot that you see on the screen, and it moved from what you know as Antigua Guatemala right now, and now we are in Guatemala de la Asunción. And this has been a long time a crossroads, an economic place where this two great roads cross over. So it comes from Mexico up to what was La Capitanía General in Central America, and it goes through the connection between the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean. So this has made this city the most important economic set of the whole country. Actually creates the most amount of the GDP for the country, because almost 75% of the most important enterprises are right here in Guatemala City. So we are dealing now with a territory that has been sprawling all over this black figure that you see right here. Here is Guatemala City is right now, and we are dealing with all these people. We have 1.8 million people that live at the city, but we actually deal with 1.7 million people that come every day in and out of the city, of the other city halls that are around the city of Guatemala. So that is basically why Mayor Quiñones is taking into consideration the dealing with the territory as a region and not only as a city as it was before, and has created this, what we call here, mancomunidades, where the different municipalidades get together in order to get all the projects that they need, basically, for the territory. So this area that you're seeing right now is the most competitive area of the whole country, because it deals with 25% of the population that has to do with economic development. So whatever you do on this area of the country is going to impact in the whole country at once. So we've been developing a plan for the city that we can replicate in other areas of the country, as you will see along this presentation. These are the areas that have been developing a long time, since the year 2012 until 2019 in terms of construction. As you know, construction and building construction is one of the most important economic developments that will lead us from this economic batch that we have been going through because of COVID. So when we discovered that these were the areas that the market took into consideration, we came out with the idea of incentivizing other areas of the city in order to create our concept of compact city. This is what we are proposing in order to keep on pushing over the idea of smart cities. So which are these territories? Are territories where there has not been a regular development until now. Some of them are territories on the north. You see 6 areas here in the map, 2 at the north, 2 at the central area, and 2 at the south. The 2 that you see in the northern area are areas of the city that have not been developed yet. In the green area, in the green spot that you see on the map, that's Zone 18. Zone 18 has around 385,000 people living over the area on the south of the green spot. And on the northern spot, you have almost 48 square kilometers of development. If we don't deal with that in an organized, in a sustainable way, that is going to become another sprawl of the city. And we are willing to change that. We are willing to create a compact city inside the city, basically. So the concept basically is that you can do whatever activity you need to do by walking, bicycling, or taking the big urban transportation that we are proposing and that you're going to see along this presentation as well. So Zone 18 and Zone 6 are areas where there has not been any kind of development until now. And we have to do that sustainably in order to create a better city for the quality of life of our citizens. In the central area, you see part of Zone 1, which is the historic central area, and Zone 9 that is very near the airport, which are areas that have very strong regulations over them. So they have not been yet developed as they could. And on the south, you see two great areas. One of them, the most important commercial area of the city, which is expanding as well. So we can create other uses that are not being developed there in order to create the compact city that I spoke to you about before. And on the south, you have Zone 12. And these dots that you see is a big transportation system that Mayor Quiñones is impulsing, which is called the Metroriel, in order to take over the old lanes of the old train. We are proposing to create a new train, a modern train, that is going to make you go through the city in 40 minutes instead of going through the city in 2 hours or more. So we are, in order to make this sustainable, we are taking into consideration all the objectives of sustainable development, and we are creating a matrix that is going to help us develop these territories using those references and impulsing them inside the city. We are incentivizing these areas. Out here you see the pictures. To the left, you see Zone 18 and 6. In the center, you see Zone 1 and 9. And on the other border, you see Zone 11 and 12. Part of it, because it's not the whole zone. So this is an idea that started a few years ago. It is not new, because it started in two different territories. One in the historic district area that has been developing since a long time ago, since the year 2004, by the implementation of different public works that made people come back to the historical central district area. And what is that doing to a smart city project? It is creating efficiency, because people now are walking on the historical central area, they are using bicycles on the historical central area, and they are using public transportation, because some of the buildings that were built a long time ago in the historical district area do not have parking spaces. And people are recognizing that the idea of walking and using public transportation is possible because we've created a secure transportation system called Transmetro that is working almost all over the city right now. And in the south, you see another spot, which is Zone 4, that made another important, it is another important asset for the city. It made us realize that regulation is important, but regulation is important if you do regulation with the landowners and with the neighbors of the areas, because that allows you to create a comfortable and a quality of life quarter for everybody. So that happened in Zone 4. If you see this slide, it has took us over 20 years to develop the historical district area, and that is because of regulations. But when you do these regulations with the people, Zone 4 is already redeveloping in only 6 years. So this idea of participation for the smart city, because you are making efficient decisions, you are making efficient use of the city hall resources and the public resources, allows you to create an economic development for everybody. And this is what we are impulsing here in Guatemala City. This strategy of participation, which is part of our smart city projects, started a long time ago with a figure that is called auxiliary mayors. I was an auxiliary mayor of Zone 15. We have 22 zones here in Guatemala City. And as a representative of the neighbors, you start fighting for what the neighbors need. And you come back here to the different directions in City Hall to claim for what citizens are asking for, and not only for what planning tries to impose over the city. So this connection between planning and the infrastructure and the down area of the field, as Ricardo mentioned, makes connections with the auxiliary mayors, and you're actually being able to implement projects that are really needed by people and that really solve the different things that are happening on the different neighborhoods. We've discovered then, in the efficient terms, that zones are different, that quarters are different, that streets are different, even though they look alike, and even though we all want the same thing, which is a better quality of life and a better opportunity for our children and for us and for everybody in the city, everybody has different routes. So in order to make this efficient, you have to consider those routes into the urban planning. So we've discovered that every territory has a vocation, has a special vocation. Our city has a service vocation. People are very amiable here at the city. And that happens also in different ways in the different quarters. The other important thing is, in order to create efficiency, we have to have urban places like parks, like hospitals, like schools, near the place where you live. If that doesn't happen, you're going to keep on moving all over the city in order to get the service that you need. So we are incentivizing this to happen in these new territories that I mentioned to you about. And of course, participation and citizen participation is very important. We are now sitting in roundtables with neighbors and with developers and with communicators and with public employees in order to see how that territory should develop. And what has come now is the implementation of the efficiency in our resources, the local natural resources. So these territories are going to take into consideration the solid waste disposal. There are new technologies that are being implemented in order to manage those disposals at the city in a different way in which we have been dealing with that until now. We are dealing with developments on those territories that are taking into consideration not to use the Municipalidad's water. Instead, they are dealing with that by themselves, and they are going to propose on recycling water and to use waters in other ways in order for them to do this more efficient, as well as the preservation of green areas. And one of the most important things is creating dignified housing projects also. That has come to the city from the implementation of a regulation for this dignified housing projects, in which Municipalidad is in this regulation allowing the developers to lower down the costs of these housing projects for the people, because we are allowing them to build 6-story high buildings without an elevator and without the usage of parking spaces. So that has to deal with our public transportation projects. So in order to make this possible, we are impulsing three great projects in the corridors, because now, as you saw at the beginning of the presentation, Guatemala City is in the middle of 4 corridors. So we are impulsing now, by a USAID study that they shared with us, these corridors for the whole city and connecting it to the other territories around the city. And these are a great bridge that is going to allow, number one, to connect the north area. As you saw in the map, the northern area has not been developed yet because it doesn't have the efficient roads to connect and to develop the northern area. So we are implementing this great bridge with the support of the central government in order to make this possible. To the west, we are implementing a project that is called Aerometro, a cable car project that is going to do an efficient connection between the east area and the central area of the city with a clean energy system. And on the south, we are settling down all the projects that have to be done in order for the train, this high-speed train or mid-speed train to get installed in the central core, in the central area of the city. There are other projects in terms of infrastructure, because our smart city appointment has to do with infrastructure, as with mobility, as I showed you before, with housing, and of course with the area densification in a more smarter way. So these are the projects that we've been impulsing in the city. And besides this, we have been also impulsing other kind of projects that have to do with technology. Technology is very important in order for us to deal with all of this amount of people that come to the city every day. As I told you before, 60% of the city that come every day, 60%, sorry, of the people that come every day to the city come to the central core, the central area of the city. So we have to deal now with the movement of these people. This has projects like smart lighting that we are implementing in more than 500 crossroads in the city, with electrical buses that are going to be implemented as a pilot project in one of the routes of Transmetro, and of course the cable car project and the Metroriel that I told to you about. And then we have other things like dealing with COVID has made us accelerate some of the ideas that we have in doing all the job that we do inside inside City Hall in a remote way. So we are now dealing with giving construction licenses through email, something that didn't happen before because we received a whole bunch of plans here at City Hall in order for you to get your permit. So some of the ideas that I would like to share. I was going to share with you guys, and I guess that my time is getting up.
Thank you. Very interesting to know Guatemala is, first of all, has a plan. Secondly, that is aligned with the objectives of sustainable development, and that you're working hard on that purpose. So now we're going to have Mauricio Rodas. As I said, this is the former mayor of Quito, Ecuador. So welcome, Mauricio.
Thank you so much, Ricardo, and thank you so much for the invitation to be part of this panel. I am delighted to be speaking to all of you today. So let me share with you some of the experiences from Quito regarding the construction of smart and sustainable cities. And let me begin by sharing with you some of the experiences regarding specifically how did we build governance for sustainability in our city during the last 5 years. As you mentioned, Ricardo, I was mayor from 2014 until 2019. So I will be commenting with you some of the things that we did during those years. And I will begin by talking about some of the planning tools we implemented for the construction of a smart and sustainable city. We tried to be very active in the city's role for the construction of some of the main international agendas that were approved during the past few years. I mean, the Sustainable Development Goals, the Paris Agreement, and particularly the new urban agenda, which, as you said, Ricardo, was approved in our city. We had the pleasure, the honor, to be the hosting city of the UN Conference on Urban Sustainable Development Habitat 3 in 2016. In that conference, the Declaration of Quito, the new urban agenda, was approved. So since that was the case, we, as the hosting city for Habitat 3 felt that we had a special responsibility in implementing not only the new urban agenda, but all of the other international agendas that I just mentioned that were approved the year before Habitat 3. So in that regard, we use all of the principles, ideas, and vision of these international agendas for the construction of our own vision towards the future. We developed what's called Quito's Vision 2040, which is a mid and long-term vision for the city, for the construction precisely of a smart and sustainable city, incorporating all of the elements coming from the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the New Urban Agenda, and other international agendas. How to localize those global agendas, how to make them feasible to be implemented on the ground on cities. So in this Quito's Vision 2040, we incorporated a number of aspects, some of which have been already mentioned by my colleagues in this panel. Carlos, for example, mentioned the importance of citizens' participation. So that was a very important aspect for us. When you think about the construction of governance for sustainability, you need to incorporate citizens. You need to make sure that the input, the ideas, and the vision coming from citizens are becoming an extremely important part of the policy-making process. So in order for that to happen, we developed a number of citizens' participation tools. For example, we created what's called Quito's Assembly. Quito's Assembly is a multi-stakeholder platform for citizens' participation, including the participation of representatives coming from all the city's neighborhoods, which they have their own assemblies to select the representatives for the Quito's Assembly. We also have representatives coming from the private sector, coming from the academia, coming from NGOs, and of course also representatives coming from the city council. So again, this is a multi-stakeholder space for providing ideas, discussing the main issues the city is facing, and of course the challenges for the future. So it has become a very powerful democratic tool for citizens' engagement in the public policy making process. Also, we created what's called the Competitiveness Council, which again is a space for the participation of the private sector, NGOs, academia, and municipal public officials to discuss how to improve competitiveness in the city. What are the problems that we are facing right now in order to make our city more competitive, and how can we solve those problems in a participatory way and in a joint effort with other sectors of society. Of course, technological tools also played a very important role when it comes to engage citizens. So we developed what's called the Open Government Platform, which is a platform for citizens to have access to all kinds of municipal information, data in many fields, in many arenas, so as for citizens to have the necessary tools, not only to be informed about what's going on in the city in a very transparent way, but also for citizens to have mechanisms to develop their own public policy proposals, having accurate data and information about what's happening on the city. We also developed another digital platform called Mi Quito, which is an open source tool for citizens to suggest new public policy proposals, to actually vote for the kind of programs and actions that should be implemented in different fields in the city realm. So it has become also a very effective way for citizens to raise their voices in order to define the ways in which the city will be advancing towards the future. Finally, when talking about citizens' participation, I would like to highlight our participatory budget program, which is a mechanism for citizens in different neighborhoods of the city to raise their voices, to define the way in which a certain percentage of the city budget will be implemented at the community level, in what kind of infrastructure works or different social programs this X amount of resources that the city is devoting from its budget would be implemented at the community level. So again, it has become another important way to engage citizens in the construction of the city for the future. And of course, all of these mechanisms, programs, digital platforms are geared towards strengthening the policy-making process, but also, as I said before, the construction of a smart, participatory, and sustainable city. Now, I was asked to talk about how do I see the future and what are the kind of challenges I think that cities will have in order to keep constructing this kind of mechanism, tools, and visions. And I would say that probably the main challenge that I see now is that in practice, with these new global agendas, the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, the New Urban Agenda, etc., in practice, when one think about how to implement them at the local level, what they have done is they have bestowed cities with new and very important responsibilities. Now it's not longer enough to deal with public transportation, public spaces, water and sanitation, energy. That's important. You must keep doing that. But you also now have to deal with climate change. You have to deal with increasingly larger migration flows that are coming mainly to cities, and that put pressure on infrastructure and the delivery of public services, but also the construction of a fair society open to all. And of course, now cities have to deal with shocks like COVID-19, right? Cities have been at the forefront of dealing with the COVID crisis, and most likely, the world will be experiencing more and more external shocks in the future of different kind. We don't know of what kind. I mean, it might be climate-related shocks. It can be, some other pandemics, etc., etc. But my point is that with these kind of new responsibilities that cities are facing now, they need more resources. And a big concern that I have is how to make sure that cities will be able to, access to the necessary financing for not only undertaking the kind of, infrastructure and public services responsibilities they had before, but now also these new, quote unquote, responsibilities that cities are facing. So, when one thinks about the way the international financial system is designed, it is very easy to conclude that it was not designed for cities. It was designed for countries. And that really poses a very important challenge. How can we make the international financial system more cities friendly? And let me illustrate my point. There are many countries in the world in which cities are not even allowed to international borrowing. There are many other countries in which cities, in order to act, and that's certainly the case of Ecuador and many other countries in Latin America, countries in which cities, in order to access to international financing, they need a national guarantee. A national guarantee that very frequently is not granted because of political rivalries between the national government and the city. So in practice, that has become a very important obstacle for cities to access to very needed international resources. So we need to really think about how to reform the international financial architecture, once again, to make it more cities friendly. And there's a lot of efforts going on right now in that regard. But good news is that even though for me this is the main challenge for the future of cities, good news is that even though this financial system is not cities friendly yet, there are ways to navigate it. And let me put the example of Quito. During our administration, we built the first metro line in Quito and in the country. And even though it was a very challenging endeavor, as you can imagine, right, we managed to do it through a very innovative financial scheme. We did it with the support of 4 multilateral banks, the World Bank, the Inter-American Development Bank, the Latin American Development Bank, and the European Investment Bank. These 4 banks did not only finance the project, but also it were their policies, the ones applicable to the project as opposed to national law. This was very innovative, and it allowed for the project to be much stricter, right? Of course, there were very, very strict policies coming from these very prestigious international organizations, very strict in terms of, procurement, finance management, transparency, and all of this at the end of the day was great, because even though it was much harder to do it, much more complex, but it allowed for the project to meet its schedule and its budget. Something that, as you all know, it is really difficult to accomplish for such a huge project like a metro. So this is the kind of examples that I wanted to share with you to say, yes, we need to promote reforms to the international financial system. We need to keep doing that, but there are some ways that, it is really important to think outside of the box, to be innovative in order to make things happen. Some other good news about international financing is that I see that the efforts being implemented are starting to get its results. For example, I see with a lot of optimism the way city diplomacy has become a very powerful tool to advocate for improving the international financial system for cities. There are very effective city networks like C40, like ECLAY, like UCLG, like the Global Covenant of Mayors, that are doing a very interesting job in advocating for these kinds of reforms. And I will finish my intervention by mentioning a very concrete example about something that is going on as we speak. The Urban 20, which is the city's engagement group to the G20, to the group of the 20 most powerful economies of the world, the U20, which is this group of cities, right now is creating what's called the Global Urban Resilience Fund, which is the response of the Urban 20 to the COVID-19 and future external shocks, financial needs for cities. So this fund, this Global Urban Resilience Fund, will be the first ever cities-led fund set up and managed by a cities platform like the U20 for cities to finance resilience-related projects in cities. So this is the kind of new facilities and mechanisms that are being discussed and created to hopefully improve the financial landscape for cities in the future, and therefore addressing what, in my view, is the main challenge for the future of cities. Thank you so much.
Great presentation. I'm very happy that the 3 speakers have been talking about people engagement. You mentioned the citizen assembly and also this idea of international finance system, how to improve the finance of cities. At the end of the day, our purpose in this panel is to stress and underline the good experiences of these 3 cities and you 3 as leaders, and also understand better how to face the future in terms of the pressures that we have already mentioned as demography as demand for services, and especially in this area of Central America, the disasters definitely are, elements to consider, because we have infrastructure that has to be changed every year, and pushing some pressure on the local finance, because the bridge or the aqueduct or any other civil work need to be substitute, and that create a pressure on the fiscal pressure in the city. After this presentation, these great presentations, maybe we can make some comments each other on the others' presentation. Maybe we can comment. There are several common grounds here: regulation, how to do regulation, how to establish the plan for the city engagement need for any decisions, the issue of governance. We may have good technical plans, we may have technological devices, we may have technology, but at the end of the day, there is a decision-making process from the authorities, from the mayor, from the council. It's very interesting what they have in Vancouver, this decentralized agency. I understand that this is agency from the city, maybe isolated from the political process that is a common political process in our countries, sometimes define periods of electoral timing, making some damage to good plans. So this is very interesting what they have in Vancouver. And also the interesting is that they have to have a plan. And this plan must be negotiated, quote unquote, it must be engaged by the people. And what would be the connections, the channels to talk and agree with the people, to negotiate with the people, because otherwise it's going to be very difficult to implement any transition. So what I'm going to do is open maybe a few minutes for each of the participants, Bryan, Carlos, and Mauricio, to make a final comments, to comment on the others' presentation, and perhaps focus on what next. You already mentioned future plans, but what is next? What would be recommendations from their side? What would be recommendation for other cities of the region? So that would be very interesting for our participants. So go ahead. Maybe Bryan is still available. Bryan?
Sure.
I understand that you had snow this morning in Vancouver, is what I heard.
That's right. Very early. We're not ready.
Okay.
So I have 2 centimeters on my deck right now. I'm looking. So that's why you can see I'm wearing a sweater. So in Vancouver, the business community operates within a metropolitan area of 2.5 million people. But the city of Vancouver, which is in the center, is only 630,000. So from a governance perspective, this is challenging because we have 22 different municipalities or 22 different cities that make up the 2.5 million. And so one of the challenges, of course, is how do you coordinate policy? How do you coordinate regulations between the different cities, especially when one government might be particularly left-leaning in their views and be, let's say, more aggressive on climate, while others might be more conservative and concerned about balancing budgets. So we have this what I would call a bit of a challenge in terms of implementation. So while we have very progressive policy, as I emphasized before, government cannot do it alone. We need to have extraordinary amounts of collaboration with the business community in order to achieve our goals. So I imagine that the business community continues to be frustrated dealing with so many different governments on so many different areas across the region. So that's a big challenge for us. And I think we count on senior levels of government to step in and take a leadership role. And we're very lucky on the West Coast that the province of British Columbia, which, you know, it's a very large province. It's larger than the state of Texas. It's larger than California in terms of land mass, but it only hosts 5 million people, which means the metropolitan Vancouver represents half of the population. So the province must pay attention to Vancouver and must, you know, collaborate with the city. And bless you, Vanessa. So, you know, I think getting support from the province is critical in terms of this collaboration and working together across all levels of government, not peer governments across the region, but also senior levels of government to get the strategic alignment. And I think Canada and the province and Vancouver are in a very lucky place right now in terms of the politics are very aligned. And it's not always that way. So now is the time to take advantage of it, because the next time there's an election, it could change.
Bryan, you put forward a very good key point, how to build this trust between the public sector and the private sector at the local level. We have seen a lot of experiences where it's difficult. It's not only Vancouver. I know in the Central American region and Latin American region, usually local private sector is it's very difficult for them to understand the regulations, sometimes oppose them. There is a kind of distrust between the private and public sector. So it's a very good point, because any of these plans or smart cities or climate cities will be very difficult to build without this combination of public and private sector will. So any other comment, Carlos Soberanis?
No, I was going to speak about how to get close to the neighbors. And Mayor Quiñones, as Mauricio mentioned, these councils has created these several councils that let us communicate the different planning and the different projects that the city has to the people. So we've had, since a long time ago, a culture council, which we share the different perspectives of how City Hall must get involved in culture activities and also with the Historical District Council. There is another council that has to deal with the development of a historical district area. And we have a community council that is made up of representatives of the 22 different zones of the city. And there you share with them all the different projections and projects and everything that you're doing for the city in order for them to give feedback of what they think and what they feel that those different projects should do for the community. But there are two new councils that were created specifically this year. The first one was created at the beginning of the year, and it's the Economic Council. So there are representatives of different firms in the city, especially the ones that have to do with construction, building, enterprises. And there, the mayor shares with them, and they share with the mayor all the different perspectives of the planning of the city. And it has been very important because the mayor has been able to share all the ideas and to put them ongoing, because as Bryan mentioned, businesses and private capital is very important in order to get the city ongoing. Although you do great regulation or you do a close approach to the citizens, if you don't get the ones who invest in the city excited about doing it, you are not going to be able to create more jobs and more opportunities and to create this better quality of life. And then the other one that was created was the Medical Council. And that was created specifically when COVID appeared here at Guatemala City. It was very important for our city that Mayor Quiñones created a temporary plan. What I shared with you at the presentation was the ongoing plan since this January and 2 years before, because the mayor took over office 2 years of the last administration period. But we were practically forced by COVID to create a temporary plan that had to do with the contention months in which the city had to keep on going and working, although people were restricted at home. The mitigation phase that was creating the health centers that Mayor Quiñones created in order to distribute the medical kit that was enabling the people to take care at home instead of packaging the different hospitals of the city and the area. And the last one that is right now ongoing is the reactivation of the economy, which is part of what I showed you today. So it is very important also always to get into consideration that a plan is important. You have to have a perspective. You have to have a place to go to. You have to aim at something in order to walk on the stairs to get to the second floor. If you do not aim at something, you're not going to be able to develop the plan that you have. So creating a plan and making the structure for the operation of the plan is very important. If not, it's not going to happen. And the other comment is having this close relationship at all levels with all the different neighborhoods. It's very important because you want to be part of the projects that the city has. They are not the city projects. They are the neighbors' projects and the citizen projects. And that is something very important to understand in order to make those projects possible.
Thank you, Carlos. Because we're talking here about the power of proximity, how to really make this transition, talking with the people, talking with the private sector, reactivating the economy. This is not a political issue. This is not a technological issue. The smart cities and sustainable cities depends upon this combination of technology, knowledge of climate change, and governance. We need mechanisms of governance to make possible, and you are right now leaders and actors in this particular point. So, Mauricio, your comments will be welcome here.
Yeah, well, I totally agree with Bryan and Carlos. I mean, this should always be a multi-stakeholder effort. And I think that's the beauty of local governments, right? Local governments are the closest to citizens. So we should take advantage of that in order to engage all sectors of society in the construction of the future of cities. Now, I want to go back to what I mentioned about the localization of global agendas in cities. And the reason why I stressed that point so much is because it is in cities where all of these global agendas will be defined. Why? First, because more than half of the population worldwide live in cities right now. And by the year 2050 will be more than 70% of the world's population living in cities. Second, because if you look, for example, at climate change, more than 70% of CO2 emissions are being generated in cities. So without an effective role from cities in tackling climate change, it will be impossible for countries to meet the Paris Agreement goals and to effectively fight against climate change. So if we are all aware of these aspects, we realize that, again, cities are the places where the global most pressing issues will be defined. Climate change, migration, pandemics, and other shocks. So that makes cities the places to look at in order to address these threats for the world. And again, we need to provide cities with necessary tools to undertake those very important challenges. And that implies, as you say, Ricardo, governance, citizens' participation, but also the issue, of course, regulatory frameworks, and of course, the issue of finance. And that's why I think that now we have an increasingly relevant tool for cities to address all of these issues, and that's city diplomacy. The fact of that's something that was not as strong just up until a few years ago. Now, the field of city diplomacy has become very, very dynamic. I had the pleasure and the honor to be very active in some of these important city networks. So that's why I learned so much, and I feel so passionate about the potential of city diplomacy, because it has become not only an advocacy tool, but also a learning tool for cities, right? With the participation of mayors and other city officials in these city networks, you have the chance to learn from each other, to exchange knowledge and best practices, right? I remember every time I met a mayor, the first question I asked he or she was, what has been your best cost-benefit policy? Not the largest one, the best one in terms of cost-benefit. And some of the answers I got became tools for me to implement those actions in my city. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can replicate effective policies that have been implemented elsewhere. And I certainly did that in Quito in several cases. And that was thanks to the participation of Quito in these international platforms. You were mentioning something really important, Ricardo, regulatory frameworks. For example, one of the concerns I have is how cities can better attract private investment for infrastructure, for public infrastructure. And the reason I think that's not happening as much in many cities, particularly in Latin America, is because the regulatory frameworks for public-private partnerships are extremely complex and difficult to implement. It is really, really complex. So how can we overcome that obstacle if we understand that those regulatory frameworks are being defined at the national level, not at the city level? And probably the answer for that is, again, international benchmarking, international exchange of best practices, in this case, regarding, regulatory frameworks for PPPs. Right? So this is the kind of thing that I think that cities and countries can learn a lot from each other. And in that regard, the role of international organizations like multilateral development banks, UN agencies, international think tanks becomes so important to promote this kind of information exchange among cities and among countries.
Thank you, Mauricio. Thank you. Well, great session. It's very honor to have, as Carlos and Dr. Carlos Mesa mentioned at the beginning, 3 regions, North America, Central America, and South America. 3 leaders, managers, academics, because all of you are related with academia, and great session. So I really hope that this session has been important for value added to the Congress, because it's the people on the ground, people working with international experience, and 3 cities. We're gonna get this good experience of Vancouver, Guatemala, and Quito as part of this Congress as the best experience to learn and to understand better this power of proximity that I mentioned before. So I want to thank Carlos Mesa. Carlos, thank you for inviting me to this session. Thank you to Luis Paulino Méndez, el rector del Instituto Tecnológico de Costa Rica, con quien trabajamos. Thank you to Señor Antonio Arriaga, the Honorary Consul of Costa Rica in Vancouver, a good friend of mine and my family. I remember him from my days in Canada, in Ottawa, more than 20 years ago. And Antonio, gracias and for the efforts to contact the Municipality of Vancouver, to contact Mayor Kennedy Stewart. We thank the mayor, and Bryan, really thank you for your presentation. Carlos Soberanis, thank you, and Mauricio. So we're very happy this morning because we already, I think, have a good session of good experiences, and we're ready to understand better our challenges dealing with climate change, with the Anthropocene, that this is a new era that the scientific community is identifying, with the fourth industrial revolution that is in our face already, and how to really be better citizens and better people now and in the future. So thank you, all of you, and thank you, Carlos.
Okay, thank you, Ricardo, Mauricio, Bryan, and Carlos, very much for this very interesting. So we will be also letting you have the copy of the proceedings so you can have and check what we have, what we are discussing here in the Ibero-American Network. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Carlos and Ricardo. On behalf of Mayor Quiñones, thank you very much for the invitation and sharing this with you. And nice sharing this panel with Bryan and Mauricio. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you, Bryan. Thank you, Mauricio. And looking forward to visit your cities after the pandemic.
Please.
Great team.
Take care. Bye-bye. See you then.